On today's episode of The Crow's Nest, we are joined here in the nest by a good friend. He is a lone wanderer, medicine man, yogi, dancer of dances, and lover of women. Some say he has been mainlining the secrets of the universe, while others just think he's a little cracked. He is the infamous and legendary Bobby A. On today's episode, we will be discussing a variety of topics. We will be talking about politics, medicine. We'll even be delving into alien life. These are subjects that I'll be honest to tell you we know next to nothing about. But get ready, buckle up, because this is going to be a bumpy ride.
I have Bobby A here, the legend. Going to tell us a story.
This just happened no more than half an hour ago to me. Can we crank this down a little bit more? There we go. So I'm walking down Metropolitan by Cypress, right over here. And I see this guy doing the stumbling, I call it the Texas two-step. I think they do as well. And he's tailgating me, though. There's no reason for him to be that close to me in a street that has no other people on it. All right? And it's still kind of early, it's dusk. It's not completely dark out. So I give him the look back, to be like, hey, buddy, I know you're behind me. I'm noticing what you're doing. Give him that look. So keep walking. He keeps doing it. So then I cross over to the other side of the street, and he follows me. And then I stop in the middle of the street and come back to the curb. Follows me back to the curb. So I go, you were right? And he doesn't answer. He's doing one of those where he can't even stand straight. He's just swaying. And I don't think I got that. So he's swaying around and doesn't answer me. So I keep walking, follows me again down the sidewalk the other way. So then I stop and I go, what's happening here? And he goes, still silent. I start walking again, keeps following me. And then I go, this time I'm a little more firm and aggressive, so I approach him. And this guy is he's not that menacing. He looks pretty well dressed. He has a peak. He's rocking a pea coat. He's 5'7", at $150. So it's this guy, in my head, I'm processing everything that's happening. And I'm saying, this guy just probably came from the bar. It's real fucked up. It looks like was doing more than just drinking, though. Because he's not even registering what I'm saying. Can't even respond to me. So when I approach him, he goes, you have a problem with me? But he's slurring it. He's you got a problem with me? And I go, I don't have a problem with you, but it looks like you have problems. I'm not the one following people in the street. So no response again to that. He just sways around. I walk again, follows me again. He keeps muttering, you had a problem with me? So I stop again. This time, he reaches into his pea coat. And I was I don't know what's coming out of that pea coat. So I grab him by the wrist, and we were close to a parked car. I didn't shove him, but I just pinned him up against a parked car, and I have his wrist. And then I go, luckily there's a couple bars, because we're on Cypress, there's bars and restaurants everywhere. I go, I'm going to go inside here. Are we done here? And he goes, yeah, let's go inside. So I pull his hand out of his coat. I don't know what was in there, but I make sure before I turn my back, this man's hand is not in this fucking inside pocket. And I walk inside, and he he comes halfway. And then he's still swaying around, stumbling. I can't even describe it as that well, because the man couldn't even stand on his 2 feet. And then he just stumbles away afterwards. And I was what just happened? And this was 7 p.m. on Cypress in the middle of a busy street. Lots of shit was happening there. And I walk in, and then the bartender goes, like, she's this blonde woman. She ended up being really nice. And I tell her what happened, and she gives me a high five. And I was like, I only ducked in here. I'm not here to, like, hang out or drink or anything. And I was like, I literally ducked in here because I didn't want to piss pump some guy in the street that was completely incapacitated. He would wake up in the hospital not knowing what would happen. Because he's not, I mean, imagine if he approached a guy that was very well trained in like mixed martial arts or something like that, and he would have just got kicked in the chin and concussed. Then he's gone. So that's what was going through my head. And it's like there's cops flying by, and I'm like, I'm not getting into an altercation right now on early on the Saturday night for some asshole that doesn't know what planet he's on right now. So that's what just happened to me right now. Go ahead.
I'm looking at Robert Avery, and he's in a state of disarray.
Yeah, I was a little rattled because I was like, am I going to have to fucking throw here?
He's prepared from his Bronx upbringing to throw down with any street urchin ready to rumble.
That guy sucked.
What is it? It is Saturday, March 14th. We are on day one. Day one of the podcast, and maybe day one of this coronavirus lockdown. So we're going to pass the mic back to my main man, Bobby A.
Thanks, bud. So, yeah, I've been reading a lot of news, obviously. I felt like George Costanza in that scene where the guy calls him a pinhead, and he gets up, and he's like, I'm losing it. So that's how I felt like this entire week. And it ended up being like, unfortunately, I was a giant skeptic in the beginning, and I was like, oh, this is because the way my brain's wired, I think this is some kind of, I always default to like a government conspiracy of some kind. I'm like, go ahead.
Follow the money. That's like Rob's
Right.
main go-to. Always follow the money.
Exactly right. It's usually not wrong. And so we're doing that, and I'm reading all this, and then Chris Corvo, and what did I call you earlier today? I said we're in a disaster movie, and he's the scientist that no one believes in the beginning in the first 20 minutes, and he ends up being exactly right. That's what he was. So now
I'm Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park.
Essentially right.
Nature will find a way, but no one believes.
Chaos theory. So, yeah, like, name it. So, yeah, you can obviously edit this afterwards. Yeah, we could do whatever, you just off the cuff. So, where was I?
All right, so what do you think about what's going on and like everything you've read and just like the difference of opinion people have? Because that's the one thing. It just seems that no matter who you talk to, there's people falling on two different camps. You have the one camp that is to the extreme, the 90-day supply camp. And then you have those who are out and about, still chilling, relaxing, and kind of have a blind eye towards what could happen and what might be happening.
Yes, that's like kind of where we are right now. So there's, and as I said, I walked here from my place, and there's people still out. People are still in restaurants. People are still at bars. People are still at markets. People are still in the park. There were families, there were children in the park that I saw, and I was like, kids are out there. So you got those people that are like, they're kind of like oblivious, as you said, to what could potentially happen. But then you have the people that we saw at BJ's yesterday who were buying 78 paper towels because they think they can never leave their house for like the next 6 months. So, yeah, no toilet paper except at Family Dollar. If anyone needs toilet paper, go to the Family Dollar. They still got it. I was there today.
I just love that when we were at BJ's, there was the one guy at checkout. Everyone has the supplies, like the bare necessities, milk, eggs, canned goods. And then you got this one guy, this Polish guy. He had a whole cart full of, what do you have, Corona?
Of course. He had an entire cart. He had one car dedicated to 24 packs of bottled Coronas. He had two of them. One had some food, but the main thing for him was 4 packs. Let's do the math. That's 96 beers. He had 96 beers in a cart, and he was buying it.
He's doing the math, and he's looking. He's like, I don't need milk. I don't need eggs. As long as I got my beer, I will survive.
So let's go back to the two camps. So we got those two camps, and now originally I was in not even the willfully ignore it camp. I was in this is complete bullshit camp. So there's like a smaller sect of people that think this is conspiracy theory. So I did listen. You'll like this. Joe, Joey Diaz. He's with Joe Rogan. He has a podcast with this guy called Eddie Bravo, who's a mixed martial artist, but he's also a comedian, but he's also like very into conspiracy theories. He thinks any kind of mass shooting or any kind of viral breakout event like we have is always a distraction from what's really happening in the government. So anytime there's something major in the government, like Joe Biden's son messing with Ukraine and like all shady shit going down there, which no one's talking about anymore, which is interesting. And he dives into that. He also talks about how during the impeachment trial, he's like, look at what's happened in 2020. We had the impeachment trial. We had the Democratic debates. We had people dropping out, immediately supporting Biden within 10 seconds of dropping out. And he was like, and you know what happens next? Viral breakout. It's to distract people from actually trying to examine fully what's happening in the political spectrum in the United States. And he always does that. For instance, another one he does was there was the Vegas shootings and like the Columbine shootings, Parkland in Orlando, in Florida. And he's like, look at the political events that were happening just before those events. It's a little extreme. He sounds a little nutty because he thinks any type of violent or, I would say, suspicious event is just a means of distraction from like the main shadow government power players. So I was listening to that today, and I thought, I mean, it does make for interesting listening. I'm not saying I necessarily believe everything he's saying, because he also sounds like he's at the other end in the extreme. So go ahead.
So, because I've listened to Eddie Bravo, and I like Eddie Bravo a lot, actually. What made you... Because I remember when we were talking about this maybe like a few weeks ago, when I sent a text message out kind of just saying, hey, like you might want to grab a few odds and ends, and you were really, really skeptical. So I'm curious, what because I know you're more in touch with, I think, the news in general. What do you think was the thing that really changed your view of what's going on and kind of changed your whole perspective?
This is going to sound like I'm being insensitive, but I'm not. But what really got me, and it's probably because it's one of my major interests, is when the entire sports leagues in the entire United States suspended their seasons. That's when I was like, this thing is for real. That was the moment when the NBA, the NHL, everybody was like, we're stopping effective immediately, and we don't know when we're going to come back. That's when I knew. That was the moment where I was like, this is serious. And then like a week later, that was like a week ago, and now we have what we have now.
Was it that like those institutions are there's so much money and they're so large that the fact that they would do that, knowing that they're like the loss that they're going to take, that they'd still do that, is that the seriousness? Is that was a thing?
Yeah, so that's the major component of it, because you have the owners of these franchises that are billionaires. There's no one there that's less than a billionaire, especially in the major sports. So like in hockey is a little bit less, except if you're like James Dolan from who owns the Knicks and the Rangers. He owns Cablevision Network too, so he's ridiculously wealthy. So when you have people like that who would never voluntarily give up wealth for all the ticket sales, all the concessions, all the like the play, all it goes in. There's like 3 more months left of you making insane amount of money. These people will never voluntarily give that up unless 2 things. One, they were told to purposely by authorities higher than them, which was the government at this point. They're like, you got to stop, because we're not, unless you're going to play a scrimmage with no people there, and you're not going to make money. But then you're still putting the players in danger. So that's number one. Or number two, they're all part of some giant conspiracy, which is not true, because a lot of them are from entirely different backgrounds, all different countries. A lot of them dislike each other too. So it's not that. That's less believable than they're saying like, oh shit, they're like, we have to fucking stop, because if not, our public perception would be, I don't care if people die, I'm gonna keep making my money. And you don't want that, and especially in this day and age, you don't want that to be your perception. And I think that's why they did.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, when you look at like, you know, that, like the different stadiums, like Disney, like think about Disney for a second. Disney has like resorts all over the world, and that they're going to close down. Like, for me, I just don't think people realize like the amount of money. It's insane. Like I have to imagine that just in resorts alone, Disney has to make millions and millions and millions, maybe billions of dollars just in resorts. Like I was thinking about this last night, and just I started to kind of spiral, because when you start to crunch and think of all the details and how everything kind of connects to something else, like the ripple effect is like vast. You know what I mean? Like it starts to get like a little bit overwhelming, because it's one thing if this is like, you know, a blip on the radar, and let's say we're overreacting, and in a few weeks it's kind of back to business as usual. But if it doesn't stop in a few weeks, it's like our systems are so precise that when you throw a few grains of sand into them, things start to spiral out of control really, really, really quickly. And it's like, how long are you going to have to live with the ramifications? How long is it going to take before the ship really gets truly straightened?
And I think we're close to that point. Like I said in the beginning, I didn't think it would ever get to even this point, and I think it's going to get a lot more worse before it gets better. And it's a lot of it, it's just like, it's in the grand scheme of the population, it's small numbers. It's still like 2,000 people in New York, and New York State has tens of millions of people that live there. So it's like, but like you said, we're getting into the spiral, because this thing is real. I never thought I feel like Dustin Hoffman in Contagion. He's like, we can't corral this thing. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. It's in Las Vegas now. I didn't know it would get to Vegas. It's definitely, they just reported now that the entire Vegas Strip is getting shut down. More money. Like, they would never stop casinos. Casinos are closing. That's when you know it's real. Disney would never close. It's closing. So I think France, just like we said earlier, France basically closed their entire country except for the essentials, like gas stations, grocery markets, medical facilities. Otherwise, you ain't doing anything in France. And I think at some point we have to do that here if we're going to end this sooner. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a real tough. I mean, our country is gigantic, so it's like, how do you feasibly really control the population so that it doesn't continue to spread? And I think really it's not. It's almost like the damage has been done, and now all you can do is try to mitigate the results, the consequences to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's the point. It's not, we can't stop it now. It hasn't reached its peak. We can't stop that peak. we just have to control the damage. We're in damage control mode. That's what the United States is in right now. And it's affecting a lot of businesses. You know, many businesses, like just for instance, like we talked about, like pharmaceutical companies and stuff, they have to stay open. People need their medicine to live. You can't close that. But things like concerts, Broadway shows, even Ubers, no one's really taking Ubers and Lyfts anymore. No one is using the MTA as much. Ridership is way down for all of that, all transportation, because nobody wants to be in anywhere near a potential danger zone. So I can tell you for myself, ever since it clicked for me and it got serious, I've literally just walked everywhere in Brooklyn. I don't do anything else but walk around Brooklyn. I ain't getting in the subway. Are you kidding me? You can't get me. You can't pay me to go in the subway right now. You can't pay me to get into an Uber. There's no sum of money that I would take. Well, that's a lie. I would take, if we're talking like 4 or 5 digits there. Yeah. Then I'll get into an Uber. Like, no offense to any driver or the company itself. I'm not even trying to knock that. I'm just saying for your own personal safety, and people are starting to realize that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I went into the city today, actually, and I had talked to you about it. Yeah. And I took the train, and it's like, here's a Saturday in New York City, and it's beautiful out. We had a beautiful day. We've had, like, you know, a mild winter, but still, like, the weather's changing. The days are longer. Yeah. And it was 2 things I found interesting. One was, yes, you noticed right off the bat, less people. Mm-hmm. But there were still people, and there were people shopping and going, like, clothing shopping. I'm not talking about grocery shopping, clothing shopping. So I think you still see that those 2 tribes, those 2 ways of thinking kind of playing out, because you have those that are like as you said, I'm not going out, I'm not doing anything. Mm-hmm. I'm going to really, you know, distance myself socially. And then you have those like tonight, like you said, like I bet you if we went to any bar in any direction, mm-hmm. it's going to be a full house because people are home. They know they're going to be off on Monday most likely, and it's like a vacation. Right.
Well, that's kind of a blessing in disguise for a lot of people, and I'm actually glad for a couple of our other buddies that we know and things like that they're still going to get their paychecks. They don't have to go out. Same situation I'm in. So that's good. I think that's a good thing. And I also respect the boldness and the bravery, because I like people that are like, you know what? I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not going to change what I do. I'm going to do what I normally want to do on a Saturday night. And like I said, I saw walking here, I saw people doing that. That's good. That gives me confidence that it's like, all right, the world, because at one point I was like, is this the way the world ends? But then I started to realize, like, okay, let's scale her back here a little bit. It's not that bad. Yeah.
So it's funny. I mean, maybe, who knows? Is there brazenness a badge of courage and honor, or is it foolishness? I guess time will tell. And the interesting thing is, at least with something that I was reading, was that you know, the way we interact for a long while is going to change. Just like you said, how you're considering variables that normally you would not have to consider, right? Like, I'm going to walk places. I'm not going to take the train. I'm going to go to this bar. I ain't going to do this. I'm not going to go here because there's a lot of people there. Like, how long will those behaviors have to change? I'm not going to go to the gym. Like, I was talking to someone, and they were saying in New Jersey and Hoboken, gyms are closed. Next up is restaurants. And the question is, like, how long will that be? How long will it be that you work from home and that's about it?
Right. Yeah. I like that question. So I'll start that answer from my own perspective. So, for instance, I was at my gym today. I'm not going to say the name because it's going to make me sound real bougie. Equinox. But they got motherfuckers cleaning that place up and down at all times. So I was there for, I would say, I was there twice a day. So I do 2-a-days now because, like Chris said, I think eventually the gyms are going to close in New York too. You're going to have to. So at some point, I'm not going to be able to go to the gym. So I was like, I'm going to do starting today, do it tomorrow again. I'm doing 2-a-days in preparation. But what does also inspire confidence is they had a maintenance. They probably paid people overtime to come in, and they were nice enough or needed the money enough to come in, and they're like, this is usually my day off, but I'm going to come in and I'm cleaning everything. There wasn't a second in that 2 hours I was there where someone wasn't cleaning the floor, cleaning the machines. It was like a rotation of just cleaning. Locker room, there wasn't a second there that I didn't see someone cleaning. And when I was there for months before, it wasn't like that. Like from every, I would say, like half hour or so, someone would come flying by, clean it up. This one was 2 minutes, he mopped. 2 minutes later, came back with the mop, same spot again, then did it again. That guy was buzzing around the locker room, just mopping, cleaning. So they're taking precautions, but as you said, at some point they're going to be told, you got to close, because we're not letting anyone out.
Yeah, so I remember you were texting me today, and you were the one. See, it's funny. I don't even get my news from traditional sites. It's pretty much I get my news from two different people. Bobby A being one, the Lone Ranger, and my man in the mountains, Henry Chan, being number two. And they pretty much offer two distinct perspectives on everything. But yeah, so you were the one that mentioned to me that what is being discussed right now is the closing of schools, which I think everyone has been talking about, but that if the schools are closed, by default, it's going to be at least two months plus. And what might come after that would be the MTA. So what would the city be like if, A, all the kids are back home, parents might still be working, and 2, what happens when New York City, this easy to move through city, goes on lockdown and you have to walk everywhere, or if you're blessed with a vehicle, can drive?
So first up, with the school situation, that's a tough one because, like you said, the CDC recommended at minimum 8 weeks to make sure everything is clean. And these are like children, so they're top priorities at this point. However, I read that in San Francisco, I'll drop some more news on you right now, they have closed the schools, but they also closed down their public libraries, and they've kind of did the old switcheroo. They're like, if you're like underprivileged, because Mayor de Blasio from New York said, we don't want to close the schools because people depend on those type of meals and things like that. Like, not even the learning part of it, the academic. They just need the childcare part of it, and they need to be fed. So what they can do is, what I would propose, and it's a good idea in New York because there's a ton of public libraries, is you just switch it up. Because libraries are a little smaller, you can control the area. You're not going to have hundreds of people there. And it's like, if you have any underprivileged student or someone that literally cannot afford childcare, which is many in New York, unfortunately, they can go to the New York Public Library, and they'll be the teachers will be there, the librarians. They'll look after the kids while because there's some people that still have to go to work now. Like, if you work in a hospital, you're going to work. If you work in a pharmacy, you're going to work. You're essential. You work at certain government sections, you have to go to work. So these people also have children and families. So they need someone to care for them, and some of them can't afford that. I can't afford to pay a babysitter every single day. So I think that was a good thing that San Francisco did, and New York would be wise to adopt that if they did.
Do you see New York locking down in the sense of, like, we're talking No one in, no one out. It's true on like lockdown, like a New Rochelle, where it's like pretty much you ain't getting in, you ain't getting out. I don't know how secure those borders are, but I mean, again, if you don't have a car, you ain't getting out. You know, if there's no trains, if there's no buses heading out the city, you're in it. You know, unless you want to go on a nice like 1-2 day hike out of New York into New Jersey, into Connecticut, you're going to be here for the long haul. So here's my question to you. You know, to those who, I mean, again, who are we? Neither of us are doctors. Neither of us are scientists. We are just lone speculators. But what do you think would happen if the worst case happened? And in my mind, the worst case is a huge boom in the city, and then also like a lockdown where you really can't go nowhere, and you start to feel like, you know, grocery stores start, you know, things start to get just a little bit light, a little less. What do you think about that?
I think that's a valid concern, and the first thought that pops into my head there would be the authorities. And as we all know, there's been a lot of issues with the New York City Police Department the last couple of years. So if we're going to be reliant on them to basically keep the peace, because if you're talking about a point where there was already a video in Harlem I saw where someone stabbed someone with a broken wine bottle. They broke a wine bottle at, I think it was a Costco, or it was like one of the big wholesale, like a BJ's Costco. Smashed a wine bottle and used that as a weapon and demanded toilet paper from someone and stabbed them when they wouldn't give up the toilet paper. So we're already kind of there, at least in certain pockets. But the issue is, and I think we've talked about this before in like a more existential view, but I always go back to the Jonathan Pryce in Game of Thrones. I don't mean to belittle the situation, but I always like that speech that he does. What's the character? The High Septon. And he goes, what happens when the masses know that they're going to overpower the few? And what happens when all the citizens of New York are going to be like, it doesn't matter, I'm rioting because I know that there's only several tens of thousands of cops and there's 8 million of us. They can't stop us. We can literally do whatever we want to do. And I'm not saying that's like apocalyptic style, but I don't know if we're going to get there, but there's a potential that can happen. You got to start thinking about that at this point.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so it's like, for me, I think the philosophy that I stand behind is like it's better be prepared. You know, it's better prepare and be wrong than not prepare and be right. So it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like, you know, you hope for the best, right? You plan for the worst. And you start to think just about the possibility, right? How do you plan for the worst? You have to begin to let your imagination go to those little dark corners that most people want to turn a blind eye towards. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, civilization hangs on a thread at every moment of every day. And real quick, things can get real rough. All right, when we shopped the other day at a wholesaler, for the most part, it was a pretty calm environment, I would say. You know, people were definitely purchasing, in a sense, preparing, but everyone was pretty calm. There was no hysteria.
There was no like struggling for product or anything like that.
Correct. So what? And this is like phase 1.5, right? These are the people that are like, maybe I wasn't taking this too seriously, but now I'm starting to take it a little bit more seriously. Let's plan just in case. Let's grab a few things. What happens when all of those people who are like, I don't think this is going to happen, when something really big happens and they're like, oh, I got to get stuff. And it's that wave of people who had turned that blind eye towards like a situation unfolding before them and now are panicked because they're not prepared and they needed to be prepared.
Yeah, and I think that's would be the critical mass point where people who would normally be cool and composed and collected and rational and logical and all those reasonable adjectives, like basically a reasonable person, what happens when they snap? And I think that's a very real I think we're at the point, unfortunately, where this needs, as you said, you need to start thinking about this. You don't want to think about it because you're scared of it, but there has to be preparations made for this type of point. So, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's like absolutely right. You know, I'm walking around the city today and I see people with their kids, and it's kind of like, all right. I've heard, at least from what I've heard, it's like this virus is not really targeting kids. It's for whatever reasons that are beyond my knowledge. It just seems to not affect them, but it does definitely affect our elderly population and those who have other ailments. But what is interesting is that even with that being true, you know, you would think as a parent you wouldn't bring your kids out. It's like, why take the risk? And it just does seem that some people are a little bit cavalier with a situation like this. And the question comes down to, it's like, all you have in this world is your life, right? We look both ways before we cross a street, even if the street is empty and there's no cars coming. Why? Because you don't know. Well, it takes an extra second, but it's your life. And it's kind of interesting that in these situations that will happen many times in life, there are many who say, you know, I'm just don't want to think about it, as if sticking your head under the blanket will keep the ghosts and the monsters at bay.
That's a great question, actually. So let's get the campfire going because I got a story here. So, you know, and I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone answer this perfectly. There's an episode of South Park where Magic Johnson, who's HIV positive, but he's been living with it for decades. And the premise of the episode is that because he has so many millions of dollars, they pump it into him and it keeps him alive. So those people that you were just referring to, the people that are like, I don't care, I'm going to go to Per Se tonight and have my dinner. I have my $700 dinner. I'm going to go to Peter Luger's and just throw Smith and Will, all the famous restaurants in New York. I'm going to go to Catch. And they don't care because if they get it, let's say you're middle-aged or younger, or your kids, like you said, they're kind of immune to it, which I'm also not well-versed in as well. But I'm going to do some research on that. They don't care because they can go to the best hospital. They'll just throw money at it. And with this disease, if you have good health care and you can afford it, you'll be fine. It's not killing you unless you're already kind of sick, you're old, or you're in, I would say, like a middle class to a lower class type situation. If you're in the upper echelon of wealth in the United States, there's no way this thing will kill you. Unless, I shouldn't say no way. There'll be the like odd exception, of course. But I think that's why you'll see, like I was in, I walked to the Dumbo Equinox. That's where I was at today. Dumbo, very affluent neighborhood. Fort Greene, same. Brooklyn Heights, same. All these places, very affluent. They had their kids out. The kids were eating pizza. They had a pizza party in a park, in a New York City park. The New York City park bathrooms aren't even open because they don't want people going in there because you know who'll go in there. You'll have like vagrants and stuff in there, and they're susceptible to disease. And what the vagrants don't have? Money. They're the people that are going to be carrying this. So I was like, do you have 17 children here having a pizza party? And then you got like homeless people sleeping on the bench over there. They don't care. It's because if I get sick, I'll just go to the best hospital. I'll go to NYU and I'll go to Cornell, Weill Cornell. I'll be there. It'll suck for a little while, but I ain't dying. So I think it's money. That's my answer.
Okay, so your answer is you think money.
Because money gives them peace of mind.
And money gives you peace of mind, which is true. But see, so I think I look at it from a slightly different perspective. It's that I think, well, here's the interesting thing. So where are we at? We're in New York City. We're on the East Coast. We are in an area in which most people, I think, believe that they know more than pretty much everyone else. And it's funny because you'll get an opinion on medicine and science from people who are not medical experts, nor are they scientists, nor do they have any real background to legitimize any of their views and opinions. And I think when you have people of, let's say, somewhat wealth, we're not talking about millionaires per se, but people that are doing well, that are overly educated, I think they tend to become a little self-involved in their own thinking. It's interesting because it's like, you'll see the things, you'll see memes of sorts of people, getting all these supplies, and usually those people are made fun of, or the words used to describe them are derogatory, as they're hoarding, they are in a frenzy. And it's like, the interesting thing is that historically, people always prepared for the worst case scenarios. You never didn't have a food supply. You always had these things because, things could go wrong and you would need them. You had extra fuel, and just in case. You had food stored away for the drought, for the, these different things that can and do come up. And I think for whatever reason, we become a little bit too comfortable, and that has changed our proximity to reality. Because the reality is that anything can happen at any time, and like all of these nice things that you have can go away. I mean, look at all these. If you go down the street, we're in Ridgewood, Queens right now. How many of these small businesses, these nice little eateries, can survive if no one went to them for a week, 2 weeks, a month? It's the world we live in is really, really, it's paper thin. It's not very secure at any time.
I think that's true. Independent contractors are having a tough time right now, so it's kind of in the same mold as what you're saying now. Like, freelance instructors, boxing, any kind of exercise, yoga. What happens when, like you said, when not the big gym closes, but with like the local gym, like right here, closes? You got people that depend on that livelihood, and that's a valid concern. Like, I don't know. I don't know who can support those type of people, because if we do close down for a little while, that it might just sink, it might torpedo the entire business. Like if a small cafe, like let's say in France, you got a small cafe, which is already they've been ordered to close by the French government. If that doesn't open for 2 months, what if they're just done? Who's subsidizing that rent? Are they going to get help from the government? There's going to be a lot of money moving around. I know there's a lot of people, fortunately, in the U.S. that are contributing. I'll give you an example. So there's a couple players in the NHL, which is why I love that league so much, that they're paying the salaries of the people that work in the stadium, like the people in the concession stand, the people that are coming... The people you can come in, the people that are coming down and serving you while you're watching the game, the people that are checking you in for the ticket, the parking attendant, like all the little people that work that actually make the whole entire event in the arena function properly. There's players that are like, we'll cover your salary for the next month, I gotcha, and contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure those people can sustain their life, because a lot of them have like 3-4 kids, and like the people in Florida, the Florida Panther Stadium in Sunshine, Florida, one of the goalies gave $100K, just him alone, And he was like, this is for all the salaries for the people there. Make sure they get taken care of. Because what you said is exactly perfect, right? These are the people that might be hit the hardest. It's like people that are not on, you would think, oh, people that are hit on government like support systems, they'll be hit the hardest. But no, the government's still going to function. You're still going to get what you need. If you need like Medicaid or Medicare or anything like that, that's still happening. You're good there. But what happens to Joe, the coffee owner, if his place closes down for 2 months? Who's going to subsidize what he lost for the entire 2 months?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, yeah, it's a small business. Like if you work for a company, I think for most people, and I'm generalizing, I really don't know, but it seems like the people who have jobs in large companies, they're going to be okay. They'll either work from home, but these companies have the ability to some degree to support them. And what sucks and what's kind of interesting is that those people who took some risk and tried to create things of their own, like you said, Joe, the cafe owner, the small business owner, can they really survive 2-3 months of making a fraction of what they make? Like you look at New York City, I mean, what restaurant can really survive in Manhattan for 2-3 months without having a fully booked restaurant every day? I mean, the turnover is insane. And these are like, restaurants that took a few, it took a few $1 million just to get them up and running and with the rent. So it's like, I really think, and I could be an alarmist, I could be over exaggerating, but like the virus aside, but the wake that it will leave will be felt for a long time. You might not feel it. You might be one of the lucky ones whose livelihood is not connected in some way. But if you're in the gig economy, if you do freelance, you are, like you said, a yoga instructor, you are a small business owner, any of these things, like you're going to be struggling. Life is going to get real hard real quick. And like you said, it might come down to other people, like everyone kind of like chipping in to try to solve a communal problem, because there will be those who aren't affected, that their money's tied up is good. There might be those who benefit. There's always those who benefit in a crisis. There will be those who become richer from all of this, and there will be many of those who will become vastly poorer from all that happens, and the ripple, the tide as it spreads outward.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the big boy in the money making machine is the media. Think of what's going to happen when you're sitting at home. How many clicks is CNN going to get? How many streams is Netflix going to get? Infinitely more than they would have gotten if just nothing like this happened. So that's why that was initially the source. We didn't even touch on that. We should now. That was initially the source of my skepticism. I was like, always look at who benefits from this type of situation. And it's always the media conglomerates and like the television stations. And now that we have the new age social media stuff like Facebook, Twitter, and the streaming services, like they're going to get so much traffic and clicks. And advertisers, because like you said, these big advertising firms are not going to be affected by this. They can still pay you money to put, and they're going to want to now, because you know how many more people are going to be on Netflix now that you just have to stay home for a couple weeks. And so, not like I said, I ended up being wrong about that, and I will admit it, because it is serious now. But I don't think they intentionally did it. But I think what you said is exactly right. The small business owner gets lost in the shuffle, like the little guy, once again, who's going to get poorer, who's going to be have to live, may have to like dip into a savings account he didn't want to, may have to borrow money from people, may have to get more loans. Like things like this are what gets lost in the shuffle. Obviously, I'm not trying to say health is not important. Obviously, that's number one. But the big companies get bigger now, and the little guy gets smaller. And that's kind of the reality of what this kind of situation can bring.
You were talking about media, and something that, is a little small note, but we are thinking about it today is like, right, what do you depend on when in these times when you're bored and when you're by yourself? It's it's the Netflix, it's the TV shows, it's the next film that's going to come out. And what's interesting is like I don't think I can recall in our life where that has been slowed down and stopped, because hey, what movies, they're not going to be able to shoot films. All those films that you are expecting to see, in the next month, the next, in the summer blockbusters, they ain't going to be able to come out if they're not done. Who's going to be working on them? Productions are going to shut down, film productions, TV productions, concerts, all of these forms of entertainment that really are the solace in times of pain and suffering. Even those things are going to be a hit. So it's kind of fascinating, right? Just how something that we can call a natural disaster, this enemy that we cannot see, and how its effect on us is almost vastly more potent than even all-out war. Because here is something that is the silent, let's not call it silent killer, but it's the silent enemy, if anything, the silent nuisance that is affecting everyone. You could call it at this point in time, it is the only thing that truly unifies all of humanity. And that's kind of a fascinating thing, because think about it. We don't have much in common with the average person living in Tanzania or Mongolia or, the farmlands in China or anywhere, right? And here's this one thing that is colorblind. It travels beyond borders and doesn't really care who you are, as long as you're a human being and you are susceptible to its structure. So it's kind of fascinating. Like, this could be an interesting thing. I think Eddie Bravo would see this as the dawn of perhaps a universal government. You can definitely delve deep into the conspiracies. Another one I would say is, why is it that it only attacks, and I'm not a medical expert, but why is it that it only targets the elderly? Was this a form of Chinese population control? If you want to go down that rabbit hole of spell-binding conspiracies, they definitely, this is something that opens itself up to a variety of speculations.
Yeah, so Eddie Bravo, jumping off that, Eddie Bravo, I think you touched on something that's should be talked about, and it's probably never will be, but currently right now in China, they're developing the 5G network so that the next wave of new technology and new phones can have 5G capability. So Eddie Bravo goes on and says, in his mind, he thinks 5G is like the production of 5G is what got these people sick, because of what it does to the human body and like our biological chemistry. That's like these waves, and we've kind of heard it from time to time, but who doesn't want you to hear things like that? And I'm sorry to say it, Apple doesn't want you to hear that. Samsung doesn't want you to hear that. Google doesn't. They don't want you to hear like that your phone that you've just paid $1,200 for is getting you sick, it's giving you cancer, it's slowly killing you, and things like AirPods, like these things that human beings have never had for hundreds of thousands of years. now that we have them, do we get this? What if it's these? So that's kind of his theory. I'm not saying this. I'm not going to take credit for this, but I kind of understand what he's saying. All these waves, all these Bluetooth, like all these things that we can't see, they're affecting our bodies in ways that we don't even understand yet. And not to get off topic, but it's the same kind of thing with these new pharmaceuticals like Adderall and all these things. No one knows the real long-term effects of this. We just haven't had it long enough. But what if these things are giving us terminal illnesses or creating outbreaks, like things like this? What do you think?
That's a good question. And I mean, I think this is one of those things that people can speculate wildly about as far as the cause of this. I mean, if you listen to one of the recent Joe Rogan episodes where he had someone who is an expert in the study of viruses and different types of disease, and he would say that this was not engineered; it was a natural occurrence. But even I think if you put it to him, I don't think he would give that to you with 100% certainty if he's a true scientist. I mean, until you can, in my opinion, until you can create a vaccine and you know it that well, you know that disease inside and out, can you truly say what it is or what it isn't? Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist by any means, but that just seems to be logically, valid in my mind. But yeah, I mean, you take it into a different direction. It's like, yeah, exactly. Like, we don't know what the ramifications are of all this stuff. I mean, we're in a room where there's so many different rays and frequencies that are passing through our bodies at every second, any moment. Who knows how that affects us? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I don't think there's anyone who really can say with 100% certainty. And then again, as you said, the people who make this stuff, it wouldn't be in their interest for this to be proven dangerous. Yeah. Imagine if Apple found out that Bluetooth was dangerous. Yeah. How many every Apple device is Bluetooth accessible. That's their whole backbone. Everything is wireless. No wires anymore. All these frequencies that you're being bombarded with every day and every moment. I think the question I wanted to ask you next was, do you take some, I want to call it morbid satisfaction in a potential crisis, in a potential catastrophe such as this? Is there somewhat of the Joker archetype that's just kind of sitting back and waiting and watching as the things begin to unravel and the wheels begin to fall off the car, as they say?
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely. The status quo from time to time needs to be rocked. And there's I got a couple movie lines that I'm going to throw at you. So Ed Harris in the 1996 film The Rock he quotes Thomas Jefferson, who says, "The tree of liberty needs to be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots." All right? So that's like that. People have to die for things to change. Number one. And of course, you got the Joker, that goes without saying. He's literally the agent of chaos. And then third, in my triumvirate would be Peter Baelish. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. A lot of people who try to climb it, they fail because the fall breaks them. But some, when they're given a chance to climb that ladder, so it's like we're saying, this is an opportunity where you can break it down and build it up. You're given that chance to climb. Are you going to refuse? Are you going to cling to love, your religion, your family, your interest? They're all illusions in his mind. The only thing that matters is that you need to try to climb. Even if you fail, you got to make the climb, because everything you're saying, as you said, like this, what if we have a total shutdown in New York. There could be potentially violence, like things. There's factors that we still haven't even begun to process yet. And in his mind, because he likes to stir the pot, because he wants to be like the counterculture, he's alternative. He's not going with anything. He's operating in the shadows, essentially. In his mind, and I think that's kind of right. I do enjoy that perspective. It's like this is the best time to seize that opportunity and make the climb. Even if you fail, go for it, because everything else, your life, your health, they're all illusions. I've made a couple characters.
We have a guest. I don't know if he'd like to sit down. We're watching him. He's just kind of like moving in the background like a ghost in a windstorm. Would you like to say something? Would you like to give us your opinion on the world stage, the circumstances that are plaguing us? Okay, he's the producer, ladies and gentlemen. No, Rob, I agree, and it's kind of like, you don't want to say it. I was telling someone the other day, I felt guilty saying it, but I see this as a very interesting adventure in a sense. And it's true pretty much of all times. Anything that's happened in history, one person's tragedy is another person's adventure. And that's like the sad reality is that, these days, if what we fear takes place, then we will be really living observers of maybe a once in a lifetime event. You know what I mean? I mean, we've had these sicknesses that have come through and have, if not hurt, but affected civilizations, have affected cities and affected different systems. So we are going to observe it and see it firsthand. And, I think we all hope that nothing happens, that all of these things is a dream and it just kind of like blows away. Like many different things have happened. I mean, I've been in New York, and how many hurricanes and storms and natural disasters that we prepare for, and then woke up and the next day sun was shining. It was beautiful. And this might be another case like that. But to be able to observe it and to see it, and sometimes it's a good thing for people to be shaken a little bit. We've become pretty comfortable and pretty complacent. And for the most part, America has not really had, 9/11, yes, but, most of all the problems in the world happen outside our borders. Mm-hmm. And this might be something that really hits close to home.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point, because one of the best things that builds character, you find out who someone really is in times of suffering and in times of desperation. So, like you said, when you're comfortable, where you're fat and fed and happy, you could do whatever you want. There's no worries, bud. But when the chips are down, when you're all in, that's when we find out what you're truly made of. And like you said, sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it's necessary to change things up a little bit. And I'm not saying anyone is behind this. That's not what I'm trying to say by that. I'm saying this, I think I do believe this. I'm just going to say it. I do believe this. There's no actual human beings or government behind this, but in my personal beliefs, I think we've talked about this in previous, the universe itself is one organism. It's one entity. And sometimes, just like when you get sick, no pun intended, what does your immune system do? It shuts you down for a little bit. You feel like shit for a little while, but then you get better, and you can never get that cold again. You become literally immune to it. So what does the universe do sometimes? When you see people like climate change, humans just trashing the earth, what does it want to do? Let's get people sick, and let's, like you said, let's shake things up basically give us a cold, literally in this instance, and then when we come out, we're going to be better, we're going to be fresher, and we're going to be immune to this again. So that's what I think that's a large part of what's happening. This is a little out there, but yeah.
No, I mean, I think there's actually some. I mean, for two crackpots talking about things that we don't particularly comprehend. No, I agree. I agree to some degree, to some extent. Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that the world is a much more, it's the Earth, let's say, is much stronger than we really give it credit for. And though we can impact it, I think its ability to impact us is in many ways very underestimated.
Definitely.
And when you listen to that scientist trying to describe this particular virus, he was saying how, here's the thing that came from a certain animal in a certain place, and at some point it jumped from animal to human. And is that a random occurrence? Was there some guiding force? And when we say guiding force, not like conspiratorial government agency. I mean like the forces that impact our lives yet we cannot see. Call it what you want to call it. Call it gods, spirits, demons, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe sometimes just like a sickness, when you get a cold, the body, let's say Earth in this case, is saying, hey, well, the system has gone out of balance. And how do we put balance? We control that population again, and we create something. We manifest something that we know that thing is weak towards. It's a kind of a scary yet beautiful realization, because it kind of puts you as a human being it makes you a little bit more humble, because I think sometimes we see ourselves as this domineering apex predator that controls everything and impacts the world and is going to literally destroy the world. And I sometimes wonder if the world is like a sleeping giant, and occasionally we're like little ticks and we bite it and it lets us kind of like keep doing our thing. But at a certain point, when there's too many, it says, you know what, it's time to shake some of these things off. They're starting to become too much of a nuisance. And this might be one of those things where it's like Mother Nature, the earth, saying, hey, we got to make room for some other creatures. So I'm going to send you a little curveball. And it's going to hit some of you. It's not going to hit all of you, but some of you are going to get taken out. So, I mean, that's one of my thoughts. I don't know how accurate it is.
Yeah, and it's really hard to prove that without, there's no way, at least at this point scientifically, but there's no doubt in my mind that that's what happens. If you look at a lot of the connections that, let's just go to a molecular level, like the things that you said, it comes from animals. A lot of another scary thing, I don't mean to go on a tangent, is a lot of things that happen in real life have come from movies. A lot of like the virus, and it starts with an animal and then gives it to the human. It's almost everyone. So, but on a molecular level, it sounds outrageous to say it, but it's not really, because at our simplest beginning foundation, I'm the same as a lion in roaming the Serengeti, because what are we all made of? Molecules, atoms. That's it. Both of us. Every living thing, every tree, every plant, every animal, every human, all over the world. If you look at us through a certain scope in the microscope, we look exactly the same. So what does that mean? What is that hinting at? And I think it's what you were saying, that Mother Nature is all one body. We're all one organism, and we're a system that operates, that's meant to operate in a certain way. And when the system goes out of whack, this is what things like this happen.
Yeah, so I mean, we're kind of just like going off the cuff, and it's like, who knows It's kind of outside of what we can really ever prove. But it is interesting to think about, right? Because it's just that, these things kind of just pop up out of nowhere. And maybe it's more common than we think about, and that these things do pop up and dissipate. And it's kind of like tsunamis, right? It's like tsunamis. The only tsunamis you know about is when they hit land and people die. But out in the deeps of the oceans, way out far from land, like these things happen, and they're just something that happened. So it could be that like these types of sicknesses and diseases happen with greater frequency. And it's just they don't carry over or they die out or whatever. But it's really interesting to think about. You're right. It's like, if you let your mind begin to spiral a little bit out of control, I think the scary truth is that as far as your mind can spiral, that's probably not far enough. Because I think these things, like what's happening now, we could be having this conversation, let's say 2 weeks from now, a month from now, and this whole thing could have blown over. But let's say it hasn't. And a month from now, if this situation hasn't resolved itself, it's going to be worse than it is now.
That's what it's predicted to be.
And it makes you wonder, because it's like, all those post-apocalyptic movies we've watched growing up. I feel like the 90s, the 2000s, how many post-apocalyptic films were there?
Well, we got everyone's boy, or we got Armageddon. We got Deep Impact. We got the Day After Tomorrow. Dante's Peak. Pierce Brosnan, great job there. There's also one that I'm missing. Independence Day, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. So you thought, what do all these movies have in common? You're right. It gets worse. It gets much, much worse. And then we get Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum that come save us. But, but that's not to be serious for a second. That's a great point. It's like, I think, honestly, it could blow over. Yeah, small. That's a small chance, though.
It'd be great.
Could be. I want that to happen. It's what I want. It's probably not what's going to happen, guys. So that's why let's start preparing for it to maybe go into full shutdown. We at least have, like you said, to, even more than logistically and practically prepare for it. Let's mentally prepare ourselves for something like this.
Yeah, I think that's well said. At least correct. Prepare yourself physically with the things you need, but I think that's a bigger thing. Prepare yourself mentally, because I think for a lot of people, the very idea of things changing in a long-term way or permanent way is an impossibility. They cannot even comprehend it. It's like I was listening to someone, it's about, talking about what you can see, and they were trying to say that like the Native Americans, when some of the European conquistadors came, they said they couldn't even see them because their brain could not process what they were witnessing, so it just literally blanked them out.
Very interesting. I love that.
And it's like,
it's like cloaked them.
Exactly. It just cloaked them. It said, we can't. They, for all intents and purposes, had vanished from their sight. They didn't exist because their brain. It'd be like if you saw God. Or you saw an alien species that just was so far beyond your comprehension, your brain just says, it just gasses out, whoop, turns off. I can't compute. And I think that this situation is like that, where a lot of people, they're like I was talking to Joe, and it's like you talk to Joe,
our friend Joe Mark,
a good friend of ours. And I was trying to say, hey, man, like you should maybe grab a few odds and ends, just in case. We were just kind of talking. And like my whole philosophy is this: it's pretty much you do you. Like I've talked to enough people. I give them my kind of like what I'm doing, and then once they start to kind of speculate or become skeptical or kind of criticize my thinking, I say, hey, you do what you feel comfortable with, but don't cry if something changes and you're stuck because you made that choice, right? Your life, come on. And it's just funny, like listening to talk. It's like, why are you trying to convince me that this isn't something bad is not going to happen? Because if something bad happens, I'm prepared. If nothing happens, what have I lost? Nothing. And it's just funny how people are. It's like you put yourself at a disadvantage because it's like wearing a seatbelt. You're probably like most people are not going to they're not getting in a car accident. You know, you wear a seatbelt for 10 years, no problem, and then you get in one car accident in that 10 years, let's say, but you still wear it because it's like it costs you nothing. It's an extra second. It's a slight discomfort, but it's a preparation for what could happen. Not what will happen, but what could happen. And it's just funny talking to Joe, and he was just like, oh, I think this is all blown out of proportion, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And it's like, dude, but like, you're not an expert. I'm not an expert. So how are you so sure that you're right? How are you so sure I'm wrong? And if I'm wrong, it's okay. Like, I spent some money, bought some food. And if you're wrong,
You can still eat now.
where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You know, so I don't know. I don't know what you think about that, or Joe in particular.
Yeah, I know. I can speak from experience because that's how I kind of was in the initial stages of this whole thing. But I think you're exactly right. It's like, if you prepare. Now, let's not say, like, there's degrees here. There's the spectrum. You don't have to buy 7 million pairs or like rolls of toilet paper. That's too much. But get enough. I think we hit the mark. It's like, at least make sure you're good for a month. Get frozen foods, get canned foods, because even if, like you said, it doesn't happen, you can still consume that. It's not perishing. So what are you actually losing? You're just being contrarian just to be contrarian at that point. Yeah, right. It's the idea of like, oh, like I'm somehow better than you because I'm not feeding into this hysteria, when it's actually risky. That's why I think the seatbelt analogy is good. It's like, all right, back in the day, like when I was growing up, people would drive without seatbelts. Like I remember driving to high school and with like my friends and stuff. They wouldn't wear seatbelts because they'd be like, I'm too cool to wear a seatbelt. What are you talking about? But it's like, it only takes 1 second for you to die in a car accident. You can not wear a seatbelt for 20 years and be fine. But there's going to be that one time. And that's like, is that worth the risk? And it's always no. So I like that. There's another thing I wanted to say. And I want to ask you more about this. I like the idea of being so in awe of something that it doesn't even register on your visual spectrum. Like, just like, I've never experienced a feeling like that, but it's kind of cool and it's fascinating at the same time, because it's like you said, like, I personally like the ancient alien theories and things like that. Not saying that they're totally right. And what I mean by that is, I think we have talked about this. I think what that show, even though you can tell people love that show because it's been on the History Channel for 15 years. There's interest in things like this. People want to watch this. There's 15 seasons of Ancient Aliens. So it's not something that people aren't interested in, or wouldn't make 15 seasons of it. But what they do is like, it's more for like programming and like entertainment aspect wise. They discredit things like that. They discredit the spiritual side and they discredit the universal side, which is more important to me. It's like, it doesn't have to be an alien that came down and helped with the pyramids or helped make the ruins, the Incan ruins and things like that, or Angkor Wat. What if it was a spiritual being? Or what if things like all the religions having some origin story in common? What if that's just a universal thing that's happening? What if it's the universe implanting it into people's minds? Like more of an organic thought idea than some spaceship went to all these 3 people and told them, this is what you have to do. But back to what was the first topic we were just talking about?
I don't know.
I lost it. Oh, Joe Mark in the preparation. Okay. Let's get back on that. But because we can go for fucking hours on that other one. Yeah. But Joe, he's a good man, one of the nicest men I know, but he's also likes to be contrarian and stubborn. So I think that's also a personality trait with him, where he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But like you said, it's like you're losing. I used to kind of be like not as extreme, but that way. But I was like, I need to prepare. I need to at least be prepared, because this wave has gone beyond than what I initially thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and to touch back on what you were saying, I mean, we could talk about whatever. We could change the subject. We are going to be trying to, for the next few days, few weeks, pretty much as long as I'm not working, and we'll keep trying to post these out and in our own way give our own observations on what's happening and what we are seeing and experiencing, and try to just offer you our perspective. But to go back to what, to change the subject for a second, it is interesting, because it's like, what you see and what you are able to, or I should say, what you're open to comprehending, really does create a limitation on what you can experience and what you could see. And I mean, you can say that pretty much of like any religion, or if you read it, like any religious text. I mean, a common pattern you see is that when humans are confronted by, fill in the blank, a spiritual entity, an interdimensional being, an extraterrestrial, like who cares? And in the grand scheme of things, something that is beyond their comprehension. How do they respond? They respond with immense and utter fear and trepidation. In most cases, they fall to their knees because they think that if I can see this, I'm going to die. I can't be able to live. Like, it's not possible. You can't see this and live. It's just like, I saw it, I must not be alive anymore. Game's over. And it is interesting. Like, when I heard the thing about the Native Americans, it's like, and someone out there might definitely try to like tell me I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I hear things third, fourth, degree of separation from the truth. But let's say it is true. It is a crazy realization, because you think about it, it's like that. It kind of makes sense. Like, imagine these creatures, these humanoids, with horses and with battle armor on, in these gigantic ships coming to shore that you've never seen before. You can't truly comprehend them because they look very different. I mean, you can even look into history when you study these different nomadic peoples, like the Scythians, and these different peoples who were so strange in some of their methodologies, how they would tattoo themselves. Anyone who's familiar with like Dan Carlin's hardcore history, he talks about how they would change and augment their skulls as children. And he said that the people that they came across them, these settled peoples, thought they were aliens, could not comprehend them, thought they were being swarmed by monsters. And I think now that we're like very civilized, quote unquote, we lose sight of the fact that, like, yeah, there's probably things out there that if we saw them, our brains would fry. We just couldn't really fathom it.
I think that's not only very well said, but it's the truth. And just look at the deep ocean. All right, let's pretend we're James Cameron for a moment. Let's dive into the deep ocean, because he's been trying to do that for years. He should just stop making movies now. That last Terminator movie is pretty bad, but I digress. Yeah, James Cameron. I did see James Cameron. He goes to the 61st Street Equinox. Saw him there. But anyway, I'll tell that story another time. Yeah, I've seen a couple people at the gym. But deep sea exploration, there's places where humans have yet to be able to reach in the depths of the ocean. And do you know how many things are down there that we don't know? What if we saw something just so wild that, like you said, it will scramble your wires. Your wires will cross, and you'll just never be able to process. And I think, what's that movie? The Wes Anderson movie, Steve Zissou, where they're kind of hunting for like that, like legendary, like I think it's a shark. It's some kind of gigantic fish.
Yeah.
Or a mammal. Excuse me, not a fish. It's a mammal. And when the look on Bill Murray's face when he sees it, that's how I think I would see it. Like, what if you saw like this magical, just giant, like enormous fish the size of like a city block, a New York City block, and you're just like, what the hell is this? And I think there's things on this earth right now that'll make us do that. We just can't get to them. But even beyond that, like, I can't even imagine being the people in the Caribbean and seeing the Spanish and the Italians come, and just what was going through their mind. They're probably like, what the hell is going on? What's happening? Like, that's literally when you would tell yourself, you're like, is this real? Is this a dream? Like you said, am I dead? Have I died? Did I wake up this morning? So it's like, it's so wild. And that was only just some dude on a horse wearing shiny armor. Imagine if it's something like I'm talking like mystical stuff. We're not ready for that. I'm telling you right now, humans are not ready for it, because it's we said, I'm not gonna tell you I'm gonna be brave. I would so scared. So scared. Just absolutely frightened if I saw like some, like, what is the word that they use? It's like it's a biblical term. It's like brilliance. It's like when you just see light, and it's like a figure in light. I think it's something synonymous with brilliance, but there's a better word for it, but I can't think of it now. I'm sorry, people. But it's like you get that feeling, and it's like that's the, like, why do you think all these religious figures? Maybe it could have been an alien. Maybe they described the alien as a deity that they knew. It's possible. I can't tell you it's not possible. But what I do know is, for fact, what we can say factually is their brains couldn't comprehend what they were seeing, and they did not know how to describe it. So maybe the way that they were describing it wasn't 100% accurate to what was actually happening, but that's just the way they processed it. I think that's a lot of what was happening there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's like a twofold thing. It's like, what if they described to you exactly what they saw, but as we said before, it's like you can only see what you're able to handle, right? And like, so you see something and you write it down. That's your brain. You're able to comprehend that. I see it. It might be very different. We saw the same thing, but we just saw two different things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I guess you could say is, like, of all these different types of people is they saw something because it changed their lives, and you know,
the world.
correct.
Yeah.
They changed the world, whether you're Muhammad or you want to say Jesus or any of these different people, Buddha, whatever they witnessed changed them to the degree that they believed. They had conviction. I remember I've heard a quote, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's the fact that, like, you know, rarely do people die for things they do not believe in.
Yes, you can't.
You can't, you know, you'll you know, I mean, you, yeah, you have to believe.
Yeah.
If you're gonna, like, sacrifice one's life for something, rarely do you do it for a lie. You do it for something you believe in. I mean, this takes us into a whole different dimension, but we're talking about, you know, religion and whatnot. But the one thing, and maybe we can talk about this another day, but what I find interesting is that you kind of even touched on, in a sense, is that people get kind of lost in the minutia of this, where it's like you have religiously minded people, you have, I don't know, people who believe in extraterrestrials or people who believe in spirits. And what's fascinating is how they, these, let's say, different groups don't agree with each other necessarily. And it's like, what if you're all just kind of splitting hairs?
In essence, that's what's happening.
I mean, in essence, right? It's like if let's say an angel, what a religious person might call an angel, was an alien. Is it what it is, or is it what it does? If the alien still did what was described to the angel as doing, I mean,
no real difference.
He's no real difference. He still did what was written there.
Right, yeah.
Does it really matter where his origins are? To me, it's like if his origins are another universe, or another dimension, or whatever you want to call like a spiritual realm, it don't matter, man. He's not on Earth.
Yeah.
He ain't an Earthling. He ain't a human being.
That's right. That's what it is.
We playing different games. I don't know. It's like an ant or a human. I don't know where he came from. Does it even matter to me? I can't comprehend him, and he can do things, or she can do things, or it can do things that I can't do. Enough said. You know what I mean? It's kind of like why does it need to be any more to that?
Yes, that's a bingo right there. You hit the jackpot with that one. I think that's a lot of what organized religion unfortunately is. How many people have died over things like, basically, like you said, we're trying to split hairs here. And I think I liked the comparison to, like, it's what we know is otherworldly. That's what makes the appearance so profound. That's why you changed your entire life because of it. It was so powerful to you that it made you change your very existence. Doesn't matter that it was the angel Gabriel, or this alien from a different galaxy. I mean, to me, there's no difference. Why people want there to be a difference is they're trying to claim that interaction. They want the Catholics to just go, oh no, that's ours. We did that. And it's like, no, but why? You're just being selfish at this point. It doesn't really have to be you. What matters is that it happened, clearly, because there's several accounts from several different areas of the world that kind of have that similar thing. So maybe that, whatever that being was, or entity is probably a better way to describe that, maybe they appear to someone else in the same way they appear to you. Why can't that happen? You were in awe of this interaction. Why couldn't that entity have done the same thing for another area of the world in the same, like, antiquity period? But I thought that's funny that you said that. It's like, why doesn't actually matter? And I don't have the answer to that. And I think it's actually a little ridiculous that there's been centuries of fighting over something like that.
Did you see the movie Prometheus?
I have, yes.
So like, there's the Prometheus, the movie, and then somehow the script got released on the internet. And what's interesting is that the script is very different from. I shouldn't say it's very different. There's a lot more meat to the script than what they actually made. And I don't know why they cut certain things. But there's a fascinating thing, because in the script, right? So if you remember the movie, it's like there's humans, and these humans are trying to, like, pretty much trying to find their makers. And they call them, like, the engineers. And, they're on this adventure to try to find these creatures. And there's more dialogue, like in the actual script, the aliens speak, and it gives you greater context to the story. But it talks about how, the engineers are saying how, we made you, and you disappointed us because we made you this thing, and you were so violent. We didn't understand you, and it describes how we sent you a messenger to try to impart to you what we were unable to impart. And in this context of this story, it's Jesus, right? Yeah. They say, we sent you this person. We sent you. We took one of you, and we taught him, and we sent him back to you to teach you what you obviously didn't learn from us. But you killed him. What else can we do? and it's an interesting. It's like he must be a religious person. I don't know who is that. Who?
Yeah, the same director as Alien.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name. It's
Keep going. I'm gonna get it.
I feel like he has a brother too, who's a filmmaker. But it's kind of interesting because it's like, all right, like take that. Let's say, what if that was true? I mean, obviously this is fiction, but like, what if it was true? What if these different figures in history who have come back and in many cases preached a message of peace? What if they were taken from some alien race that said, we need to impart something that you obviously haven't learned. Like, here, we're going to teach this, or we're going to inspire this person, or we're going to somehow instill something that's otherworldly wisdom and give it to this particular person for whatever reason, to teach the masses. Like, whether that's a deity or some advanced species, it becomes interesting because it's like, does it really matter? Because obviously the message needs to be instilled and imparted. I think sometimes it's like it was, if you use Jesus as a particular character, would his impact change if you found out that he was just a man, or if the information, wisdom he received came from an alien entity? Like, does a good man change because you found out some strange fact about where he came up with his ideas, right? It's like, aren't we about actions? What you do defines you, not really anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of it right there. It's like there really is no need to differentiate it. Like, and it's more of like a territorial thing, as I was trying to say. It's like they're trying to claim it so that they're the ones that have the chosen one, or the gift from the gods, right? When actually the coolest part is that your creators, your makers, sent you one of their own, or sent you someone in their own image. I think that's how the Catholics do it. And not only did you like vilify him, you literally publicly executed him. So you say you want to learn about your origins and your existence, we gave it to you, and you threw it right back in our face. So what does that say about you guys? And I think that's a great way to describe just human nature in general.
Interesting. So this was a good talk. I mean, honestly, I think we covered a lot of different things. As always, it's always fun to chat with you because I always like the way you see things, and also I think your ability the way you word your thoughts is like really sharp.
Yeah, this is going to be good. This is the first of many here.
So we're going to be signing off, and I would hope that we will get back to you sooner rather than later. Hopefully, we are able to pump these out, since I mean, we're not on official lockdown, but I feel it. I feel that it's coming. I feel that the chains are being brought out, the locks are being greased, the keys are being prepared, and who knows what will happen and when.
That was another episode of The Crow's Nest. We'll be back with another episode very soon. But in the meantime, if you feel a desire, a burning itch to help us make this production even better for the ears, better for the eyes, better for the soul, then pop on over to our Patreon account, where you have the opportunity to give us those nickels, those dimes, those pennies, or those dollars. Honestly, whatever amount, it does help, and the hope is that this production will get better and better. And yeah, so everyone out there listening, have a great night.